Hello. Funny? I think it's funny. You know Brent Ozar from yesterday? Probably. He invented that website, DBA Reactions, where you can find all these kind of funny animated GIFs. You really should check it out. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my session, Advanced Backup and Restore. Now, everybody had a good lunch? Yeah? All right, great. Now, before we get started, I need two candidates. I have two mics. I need two candidates. I have a small pop quiz, and you can win a very special prize. Who's in for a pop quiz? You are. OK, you can take that mic then, please. Anybody else? Another candidate? Yes, all right. The one that raises his hand first can answer the question. Yes, of course, but you still have to wait for the question. All right, first question. Who can tell me what the difference is between full recovery model, simple, and bulk locked? You're the first.
I already raised my hand. Oh my.
Good. Full recovery mode, you are able to go point in time restore. Simple recovery mode, you checkpoint for every update, and bulk recovery mode, you only get the updates. You get all the updates except for the one from the bulks, PCP and etc.
Correct. 1 point for you. Everybody understood the answer?
Yeah,
okay,
cool.
Great. Second question. What's the difference between a full backup, a differential backup? Well, he was first. And a transaction log backup.
So full backup is the complete backup of the entire database. Differential is the changes that happened since the last full backup. And transaction log is essentially incremental transactions that happened since the last full or the last differential.
All right, perfect. Cool. So we have an execo for the moment. So last question of today. What is a point-in-time restore? You were first.
Okay.
It's as the word says, it's a restore where you go through your full backup and go through your, if you have a differential, you go through that, the latest, and you spool on all the transaction log up to the time where you want the restore to.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. You're the winner. Woohoo. And your prize is a free hug of me after the session. All right. Now that we all know the basics, today I'm going to explain a little bit more about the other backup and restore options that you can use in SQL Server. A little bit about me. My name is Pieter Vanhove. I'm a SQL Server DBA consultant living in Belgium. I tweet sometimes, so you can follow me on Pieter_Vanhove. I also have a blog, pietervanhove.azurewebsites.net, where I just blog my SQL experience, things that I have seen, or some scripts that I have created that might be useful for you. If you should have questions, there's also my email address. Don't hesitate to send me an email. I will try to answer it. OK, let's have a look at the agenda for today, which is pretty easy. So first, I'm going to talk about backups. Then I'm going to talk about restore. And last, I'm going to show you how you can easily restore your system databases, which is not that difficult. All right, let's get started with partial backup. Now, if you look at the word partial, it means you're actually going to take a backup or a part of your database, and that's what you're going to back up. Which part? Well, you're going to back up all the read and write file groups. So this means if you should have a database with read-only file groups in there, they won't be in the backup file. On the other hand, if you're just using one primary data file and the log file, of course, then there is no use of using the partial backup because it will be exactly the same as a full backup, right? Now, in which cases should you use this? Well, mostly it's used with large data warehouses, for example, where they have 1 or 2 read-only file groups, so they won't be in the backup file. But let me tell you a story or a case, an OLTP case, where I've used this. Before I became a DBA consultant, I worked in the telco business. So the systems, they were doing a credit control. So call came in, we did the credit control, and we sent the call back out. But at the end of each call, the system had to write a so-called call detailed record, so a record with information about that call, the duration, the destination, the costs, and so on. So as you can imagine, that CDR table became really, really big. So what we did, we built a CDR archive table, which contained all the call detailed records, and we did one live database, which contained the CDRs of the last month. So every month what we did, we need to transfer the recent to the archive table, and then we need to put it back on read-only. So in that case, we only took one full backup each month, because we've updated the read-only file group. And then afterwards, every day, instead of taking a complete full backup every day, we just took a partial backup, which was a lot faster, because the read-only data never changed. Are there any issues by using that? Not that I'm aware of. The only thing that you have to keep in mind as a DBA is that you always need to have a full backup, because you need that if you want to restore the partial backup. All right? Now, what's the syntax? I especially say syntax because there is no GUI around it in the management studio, so you cannot tick any checkbox that you want to take a partial backup. No, you have to do it with T-SQL. You just have to include the option read-write file groups, and then you will automatically take a partial backup. Okay? Let me demonstrate how you can use this. No, that's not a good one. So what's the situation? I have a SQL Server, of course, with an AdventureWorks data warehouse. And if we look at the files, here you can see I have 4 files, a primary file group, a dimension file group, a fact file group, and an archive file group. And as you can see here, the archive file is set to read-only. Okay? Now let's start with taking a full backup of that database, just an ordinary simple full backup. Just takes around 5 seconds. And as you can see here, okay, I did a backup of around 150,000 pages, and it took around 5 seconds. And as you can see, it just took all 4 of my file groups, which is okay, because it was a full backup. Now, let's take a partial backup. See here, this is the read-write file group syntax that you need to add. When I execute this, it's already done. And if you look closely, I just did a backup of my data file, my dimension file, and my fact file, and of course my log file. But the archive file, which was read-only, isn't in there. So I just processed 11,000 instead of 150,000 pages, and it just took me half a second. So it's much faster because you have to back up less. All right? Good. Next new feature that you can use is full file backups. Now, instead of taking a backup of your complete database every day, you can split it up and back up every file separately, right? Now, what are the benefits? First of all, you have benefits of manageability because, on scheduling. So you can schedule at whatever time. For example, I back up my primary file at 10 o'clock in the evening. Then after my ETL load, I'm just going to back up my fact file group at 3 o'clock at night. And then at the end, I'm just going to back up my dimensions, for example. So you have much more flexibility when you're using separate files. Another possibility or advantage that you have here is that you're reducing the restore time. Instead of restoring the whole database, you can just select that one particular file that you need to restore. And yeah, so your restore time is going to be much, much shorter here. Okay? There are, of course, there is one disadvantage here, and that's the manageability or the administrative tasks for the DBA. We all love that, right? Administrative tasks. Well, if you're using full file backups, you will have a lot of files that you need to manage. So you have to think about, okay, compared to taking a full backup every day or just putting all my time in managing all these backup files, you have to compare these two, and choose what suits you best, of course. Okay? Full file backups can be used with simple recovery model. The only limitation that you have there is that you have to back up all the read and write file groups at the same time when you're using simple. Back up all the read-write file groups. Yeah, that's the same as just doing a partial backup. Now, when you're using full backup or full transaction log, full recovery model, I'm sorry, yeah, you can choose whatever file that you need to do. You just have to make sure that between the start of your first file that you are backing up and the end of the last file, you have to make sure that also you back up your transaction logs. Because otherwise, in that case, if you don't do that, you will not be able to restore a full backup if you want. So you need to make sure that you also have the transaction log backups in there. Okay? Now, let me show you how you can do this. I think most of the people already have used this. This is something that you can do in the Management Studio. So if you go to Tasks Backup, and instead of here choosing Backup Component Database, you can choose Files or File Groups. If you choose File or File Groups, you can see here in the box the files or file groups that are available. You just select them and you click on OK, right? Another possibility is, of course, with T-SQL statements. So let me first show which files I have. I have my data file, dimension, again, the same files here. So first of all, I'm just going to back up my primary file group, so I need to add the syntax file equals and then the logical file name, which is in this case AdventureWorks DW 2014. Okay? So I do backup, and the result is I just did a backup of my data file. That's it. You can combine these two as well. For example, I will back up the dimension and the fact file group at the same time. So instead of specifying file, you need to specify file group here. Okay? No, not zooming, but doing that. And in the result here, you can see that it's just dimension and fact that it did. Okay? Is anybody using this already? Files, separate files? Nobody? Okay. Third backup topic that I want to talk to you about is backup encryption. Microsoft introduced since SQL Server 2014 backup encryption, finally. So they already had TDE, but let's say if you have really sensitive data in your database, you couldn't make any backup encryption of that. Now, since SQL Server 2014, you can do this. Also, they needed that because they also provide backup to the cloud, to their Azure storage. And I have a lot of customers that were thinking about it, but they always told me, yeah, I don't trust the Azure storage. You never know who can get a hang of my data files or my backup files. But with that encryption, even if you get to that file, without the encryption key, it will not be possible to do a restore of that database. Now, talking about keys, there's no encryption without keys, and the same is also for the backup encryption. So what you need is, first of all, a database master key, which is actually a symmetric key that you create out of your master database, right? Now that master key is encrypted by the SQL Server's service master key, right? And that SQL Server service master key is again encrypted by your SQL Server service account credentials in combination with the Windows Data Protection API. Okay? So, in fact, when you install SQL Server, it's going to create that service master key, which is independent for each instance, or is unique for each instance. Once you've created your database master key, you also need to have a certificate to create a encrypted backup file. Okay? There are a few restrictions when you want to use backup encryption. First of all, Express Edition and Web Edition, they don't support it. Well, it's not completely true. They can read an encrypted backup file, but they cannot take an encrypted backup file. Secondly, but I find this strange that Microsoft is putting this in their documentation as a restriction that older versions of SQL Server cannot read an encrypted backup file. Sounds logic to me because you can never restore a more recent version of a database to an older version. So I don't know why they put that as a restriction, but anyway. And the last restriction that you have is that you cannot append the backups to an existing media set. So you need to create, every time you need to create a new media set. But that's kind of a minor restriction. Recommendations that I can give you, if you're already using TDE, maybe you can use another certificate just for the backup, which will give you an extra layer of security on that one. And secondly, you really have to take a backup of that master key and that certificate. Take a backup of it, put it in a safe deposit box, put it on another server. Don't leave it on the server itself, because when you need to reinstall it, you really need that master key and that certificate if you want to do a restore. So keep that in mind. If you don't have it, forget it. You will never be able to do a restore of your database. Keep that in mind. All right, let me show you how you can create an encrypted backup file. So first of all, I need to create my master key. So this is the syntax: create master key, encryption by password, and then you need to specify a really difficult password here. Okay? So let's do that. That's already encrypted. Sorry, not encrypted, created. Secondly, I need a certificate. So just give it a name and a subject. Right? And then you can start working and implementing the encryption. So backup database to disk, and this is the new class with encryption. So what are the parameters? First of all, the algorithm. You can choose between AES 128, 192, 256, or triple DES. So depending on the encryption that you want, you can choose the algorithm. And secondly, you need to specify the certificate that you have just created, right? So if we do that, I just took an encrypted backup file right now. And as you can see here, SQL Server is giving me a warning. Warning, the certificate used for encrypting the database encryption key has not been backed up, blah, blah, blah. So it's actually giving me a warning that I need to back up my master key and I need to back up my certificate. So how do you do that? So this is the syntax: backup master key to a file, and you can again encrypt it with a password. And this is backing up your certificate, again with a private key and an encrypted password. Now, if you should look at the my backup folder where I've just put them, you can see these three files, which is my certificate and my master key. Just take them, put them on another server, put them somewhere else, but then you're 100% sure that you have them. Okay? For the restore, that's exactly the same like a non-encrypted backup file. Just restore from file or from disk or from tape, whatever. So that's exactly the same. They've also introduced that in the Management Studio, of course. So if we go to backup, here in the backup options, you can see encryption. But as you can see, it's grayed out completely. And it's also telling me why. That's one of the restrictions. Encryption is only available when backup to a new media set is selected. Okay, so if you go to the media options and select here backup to a new media set, and if I go back now to the backup options, yay, I can activate it. I can choose my algorithm that I want to use, and I need to select my certificate, and I'm good to go. All right? Concerning performance impact, when you're using backup encryption, I did a few tests, and when you're using the AES algorithm, you get an extra CPU load like 5%. When you use the triple DES, you get an extra CPU load of 15%. So that's something that you have to take into account. All right. Go back to the presentation. Last about backup is how you can improve your backup performance. Everybody knows the problem, like my backups, it takes 8 hours or even more, 24 hours now. I can give you a few tips on how you can improve the speed of your backups. First of all, compression. Microsoft introduced in SQL Server 2008 Enterprise Edition or 2008 R2 Standard Edition and onwards, data backup compression. So they're actually going to compress the backup file, so it means it's going to be faster. Why? Because it has to write less to disk. Even then your restores will be faster because you will need to read less from disk. And if you're using that for migration, your backup file will be smaller, so the copy time will also be smaller. You can activate it in your backup command by using compression or no compression, or you can activate it by default on the server level. I always enable it. I never have any issues with enabling compression. It just gives a slight extra CPU load, but I always enable that. Okay. I did a test, but I cannot demonstrate it because I did it on a big database. And it will take half an hour just to take a backup. But I can show you my results here. So first step, what I did, I just took a normal backup with no compression. And as you can see here, it was around 4,000 seconds that it took to take that backup with a throughput of 22 megabytes per second. All right? By just enabling the compression, I brought it down to around 3,000 seconds just by removing the no in the no compression. So it's already 1,000 seconds faster just by enabling the compression, and I got a throughput of 30 megabytes per second, which is good, all right, already 1,000 seconds faster. Second option that you can activate is striping. Everybody probably takes a backup to one file, right? But you can stripe this over multiple files. Now, how many files do you have to use? Depends on the number of CPUs, but you have to play with it. It is not a fixed number. So by default, there is only one read and write thread to the backup file, but if you spread it onto multiple files, it will be much faster because you work in parallel then, right? Plus, if you should use different disks for every file, it will be even much more faster. But anyway, if you just stripe it on the same disk, I did a test, it's already faster again. So if we look at my tests again, what I did, instead of backing up to one file, I just striped it over 4 files because my server just had 4 CPUs. And if we look at the result here, it's 1,700 seconds. So again, more than 1,000 seconds faster just by striping it over 4 files instead of 1. Okay, so I'm already half faster than in the beginning. And as you can see, the throughput here was also 53 megabytes per second. Now, the last options that you can use is a combination of the buffer count and max transfer size. So these are options that you can include in your backup command. Now, the buffer count specifies the total number of I/O buffers that is used by your backup operation. So if you not specify this manually, SQL Server is going to use an algorithm and for example, in this case, it has used 22 buffer counts with a max transfer size of 1,024 kilobytes. Now, if you want to have more buffer counts, so you want that your backup process will take more buffer counts, you can specify that. So what I did, I specified, first of all, a buffer count of 50 instead of 22, right? When I did the tests, in the beginning I had 1,700. It even took a little bit longer. So not good, right? So I've hired it to 100 instead of 22. And instead of 1,700 seconds, ooh, look, I've just got 1,300 seconds. Again, faster. Now let's take a look if we took 150. Yeah, okay, again, it was 100 seconds faster. Now at some point, the buffer count doesn't give any effect anymore because I've then hired it to 400 seconds, or 400 in the buffer count, but as you can see, the result was almost the same. So at that point, for me, that 150 gave me the best result. There's no fixed number. You really need to try and error that on your servers itself. And then you can also play around with the max transfer size. So that's the maximum size that is transferred to the backup media in one time. By default, it's set to 1 megabyte, but you can go up to 4 megabytes. So you can also play around with that. But in my example here, it didn't go any faster at all. So I started with 4,000 seconds, and just by enabling a few tricks, I brought it down to 1,300 seconds, which is okay. All right? So these are things that you can use. One thing that I would like to mention about the buffer count, don't put it too high, because otherwise your SQL Server will run out of memory. So keep that in mind. All right. So backup striping, buffer count, max transfer gives you faster backups. Look at the time. Okay. So we've seen backup, partial backups, full file backups, backup encryption, and we've just seen how you can improve the speed of your backup files. Right, let's go to restore, and then system databases. File restore, it's, yeah, the opposite, of course, of file backup. You can also do a file restore. Now, instead of restoring the whole database, now you can just restore one file in your database, which gives you, again, more flexibility. And you can use the option with online. This means that during the restore of that file, your database stays in a state of online, and you can still query it, right? Except, of course, for the tables and the objects that are in the file group, that is being restored at that moment, right? Online is an enterprise feature. So if you're not on enterprise editions, you will not be able to use this. Offline is, of course, the opposite. Your database goes completely offline during the restore of that file. Once it's restored, your database will come online automatically, okay? Yeah, let me show you how this works. Restore files. Just need to check if there are any connections that are still open. No, they're not. First of all, I'm going to take a backup of my transaction log here. And what I will do first, I'm going to just do a restore of the file archive. So I'm going to perform a restore of my read-only file group back in my database. All right? If I do that, it'll just take a few seconds. And that's already done. And here at the result, you can see it's just the file archive that has been restored. All right. Now, what I will do during the next restore, all right, that's what I wanted to show you too, that it's online. I will do the restore again, and during the restore, I'm going to select on my database so that you can see that my database is actually still accessible except for the archive file group. All right, so let's do that again. See? So I did a select of my dim date table during the restore. That worked. Fact table gives me also the results, but for the archive, I got an error here mentioning the query processor is unable to produce a plan because it's in a file group that is not online, which is logically because it's in the restore mode. Okay? What I will do now is I'm going to restore the fact file group, or the fact file. Yeah, I need to change this one. All right, that's already done. Now, if we have a look at the files, you can see here that the fact file is still in restoring mode, right? That's normal because it's a read-write file group. So, in fact, after you restore a file, you also need to apply the transaction log backup again before the file can come online, okay? So I will do that. I'm going to restore my previous transaction log, then I'm going to back it up again and restore the other one. So if I look back now, you can see indeed that the fact file group is online again. All right? So during the restore, your database keeps or is still available. Okay. Anybody has used this already? File restore? You have? A few people? No? So you can also take it out of the full backup file, of course. You don't need to use file backups if you want to do a file restore, all right? Brings me to the next topic, which is the piecemeal restore. If you look again at the word piece, you're going to do a restore of our database, but in different stages. So let's say your database is completely gone and you need to restore a full backup, but it's really big. You can start with working in pieces. So first you start with restoring your primary file group. This one can come online already, and then afterwards you can apply the other file groups in your database in pieces, so in different stages. Can be done online or offline again. So when you want to use piecemeal restore, again, that's an enterprise feature. You need to use the word with partial. So you start with your initial restore, and then you need to indicate that you're going to do a piecemeal restore, and then you need to specify the with partial. Now after that, once the primary file group comes online, you just need to add the extra other file groups onto the database. Also apply every time you did a restore of the file group, you need to apply the transaction log backup again, so that your data is up to date. Okay, let me demonstrate how we can do this. No. That's a piecemeal restore here. So what I will do first, I will just take a complete full backup and a transaction log backup of my database so that I can start with a clean situation here. Just takes a few seconds, and I'm just going to drop my database. So I don't have anything here anymore that looks like AdventureWorks. No. Now, first of all, as I explained, we need to restore the primary file group, and we need to indicate it's a partial. So this is the partial option that you need to specify for the primary file group. Now, the restore command is the same, restore database, file group primary from disk, where you specify your backup file. And after that, you also need to apply the transaction log backup again. All right? Let's do this. So here it is. And indeed, my backup is already here, and it's not indicating that it's offline or something, so it's accessible. Now let's have a look at the data files. And what we see here is that my primary file group is already online, which is good, but still dimension, fact, and archive, they are still in recovery pending, which is normal. I still need to do the restore. So this means if we try to access the tables, it will definitely not work. Secondly, let me restore the dimension, same syntax, but without the partial keyword in it. You just need to add the extra files here. And again, as you can see, I need to add the transaction log, or apply the transaction log backup again. Let's have a look at my files. Yep, dimension is already online, so I can access these tables already. So let's give it a try here. Yep, I can already access the DIM database, which is good. Secondly, that will be my fact that I'm going to do, that I'm going to restore. Let's check again, it's online. And this is the recovery for my read-only file group. And as you can see here, I don't have to apply my transaction log. The answer to that is that, yeah, it's read-only, so nothing has changed in that. So I don't need to apply the transaction log for a read-only file group. Okay? So let's do this. Yeah, the archive is the biggest file group, of course. That's done. And if we look at the files, they're all online. So it might be useful when you have really big databases and you want already to have access, and if you should have an archive file group that is not that important, you can use this piecemeal restore. All right? It's not that difficult to use. Okay? Great. Let's go for a page restore. And you have somebody had already a corrupt database? Yes, we have a question. Did you have a question? You have to shout, I guess, because I will not hear you. Or you have to take the mic. Here in front, there is a microphone that you can use.
What about the partitioning with piecemeal backups? If I have a table, date-based partitioning, some of the partitions are in the first file group and some of them are located on the other partitions, files.
Yeah.
And I want to make a piecemeal restore.
Yes. So the question was, what about if you use partitioning and they're all in the same file group, or they're
Different file groups. But the table object is one single object.
Yeah. Okay. During the piecemeal restore, you will have to restore all the files and file groups at the same time to get that table then up and running. It's not that one part of the partition will go online. No, that's not possible. It's the whole table in one time.
Okay.
All right?
Thanks.
Okay. All right, page restores. Probably you all have had a corrupt database. So if you do a DBCC check DB, oh, damn, you have some pages that are got corrupted. Well, there is an option where you can just restore these particular pages out of a backup file into your database, right? Now, when is this useful? When there are only a few pages that are damaged. If you see that there are a lot of pages damaged in your database, don't even bother using page restore. Just go for a file restore. It will be much faster. Plus, secondly, you also have to look what is corrupt. If it's just a secondary index that it got corrupted, just drop it and rebuild it, and your corruption will be gone, and you don't have to perform a page restore, right? There are a few, of course, limitations again, and these are, you can only do use full recovery model. Well, Books Online mentions that you also can use bulk locked, but then at the end, they're just mentioning it's not recommended to use it. So just use it with full recovery model. You can only restore data pages, so no pages in the log file, of course. This is not possible. And you can only use this on read and write file groups. So it's not possible for read-only file groups. All right? Let me demonstrate how you can use this. This is pretty easy, again. Let's go to restore of a page. So I have a corrupt database, and let me prove to you that I'm right. So I just did the DBCC check DB, and if I scroll down here, yeah, indeed, oh, I have an index 1 that is corrupt. Okay. Now of course, you have to make sure that you have one backup file where that corruption is not in it, of course. Otherwise, yeah, it's not possible to do the page restore. You just right-click on your database, you go to Restore, and you select Page Restore. Yeah, now I lost it. Restore Page. I'm on the wrong database. That's the good one. Restore Page. Yeah. And it sees immediately, okay, in file ID, one page 2784 is corrupt. All right, no problem. It's going to perform a tail log backup of my database. And then here it shows you the backup sets that are available. It will just take out that page and restore it. This is going to be really fast. I did not want. Oh, right. I deleted my backup file here. That is not good. Let me see if I can get with this one. No. Yeah, sorry. I was too enthusiastic, so I deleted my backup file. I cannot show it to you. But believe me, it works. I've tried it. No, I was too enthusiastic. Sorry about that. Okay, restart or restore. Anybody know this feature? Nobody? Let's say you're doing a restore of a really big database, and you're at 95%, and then suddenly network glitch or your disk goes out. Damn, you have to start all over again, right? But there is an option which is called restart, where you can restart your restore from the point where it just actually stopped. Now, that is what Books Online mentions, but it's not like that. It's not working like that. Actually, according to me, it's crap. Shh, didn't tell it. Now, what happens during a restore? The restore command is writing to a checkpoint file. It's nothing to do with the checkpoint in SQL Server. No, it's writing to a file. And when the restore gets interrupted, it's going to check that file. Okay, hey, where was I? In what stage was I? And then it will start again from that stage on. But there are just only 3 stages. First stage is creating the data files and zeroing them out. That's one. Secondly is the copy of the data into the files. And third is doing the backlog, so the redo log of the backup. But if you ask me, if you have activated the Windows setting perform volume maintenance tasks, creating the files is just like in a few seconds. Then you have the big restore, but if it fails, it will just start without creating the data files. But it will start all over again with copying the data. So you don't win much time if you ask me. But it exists. Maybe you can play around with it, but I don't see many advantage of it. So, but I just wanted to mention it to you. All right, that was the restore part. So we've seen backup, we've seen restore, we've seen the file restore, piecemeal restore. I tried to show you page restore and the restart. Last topic for today is the system databases. How can you restore your system databases in a fast way? So you've probably all seen this. Hey, somebody calls, SQL Server is unavailable. Okay, and then you have a look, and suddenly all your system databases are gone. Now let me demonstrate how you can restore these databases. It's explained again in Books Online, but not very clear according to me. So if you want, just go to my blog, and I have described in different steps how you can easily do a restore. So this is the data path here that we see, and I don't have any master, any MSDB, any TemDB. Well, I have TemDB, but I don't have the other model. It's not available. So before you can start the service, SQL Server needs to have some kind of version of the master database, right? Now, how can you get a new master database? That's by executing the following command. So you need to add your SQL Server DVD back into the server, and you need to specify the command setup/action equals rebuild database. When you do rebuild database, it will just create a new master, a new empty MSDB, and a new empty model by default. Okay? So let me do this. This will just only take a few minutes. Oops. Yeah, like this. Now, there are 2 possibilities. I'm going to demonstrate the official way, but there is also another possibility. What you can do is just take the backup files of your master database, and restore them on another SQL server, which is the same version of your current SQL server, but restore it under another name, like master server X, for example. Once you've restored it, just detach that database, rename the files, and copy these MDF and LDF file back to your original server, and you can launch the service again. So this is how you can do it the non-official way, but I'm going to show you how you can do this the official way. So by talking to you, the rebuild of my database is already done. And if I go here, I can see, yep, I have already a master, a model, and an MSDB database. But it's empty, so it's not what I want. So don't delete the other database files here in this case. Now what you need to do is you need to start a SQL Server instance right now, but with a special startup parameter, which is -m. -m means you're going to boot SQL Server in single user mode. So there will be only one connection that will be possible to that SQL Server. You add it, and I'm going to start my instance right now. It started. Now what you need to do is you need to open a SQL command box right now, not the Management Studio, because then you might have a chance that you already opened 2 connections to the database, which will not work. So I'm opening a SQL command, and then you just need to perform a restore command of the master database. Like this. Let me zoom in. Restore database master from disk in my case with replace. So I'm going to replace the current master database, the empty one. All right? I'm just going to select go. That's already done. And if you look closely, what happens? The master database has been restored successfully, but the instance had shut down automatically. This is necessary because it needs to replace the master database. All right? So what I need to do, if I do a refresh here, I just can go back to the properties, go back to my startup parameters, and remove the -m. Apply. And right now, I can just start my SQL Server instance again. It's going to use the original or the last version that was in my backup file. And if I connect to my instance now with the Management Studio, ta-da, everything is back up and running. My databases are back up and running. All right, we have a question.
How you can guarantee that this single user mode, you will be with that user?
That I'm the only one. Yeah. The question is, how can you guarantee that I'm the only one that has a first connection? That's what you're asking. Yeah. You can't. You have to make sure that your SQL Server is isolated and that you're the only one. Believe me, I had the issue at a customer, but the SQL Server instance was running on a cluster. So what happened, as soon as I restarted the instance, in SQL Server, there is one process, the SP Server Diagnostics, that runs constantly in the back. So that connection was always the first. So I couldn't enter that. But in my blog, I explain how you can start up a clustered instance without the SP Server Diagnostics connection coming in first. So you can get around it, right? But it's right. You're not sure, but you have to, as a DBA, you have to make sure that you're the only one that can connect at that time, so not your applications. That's right. Yes? Sorry, can you repeat again, please?
So the question of the first connection is quite valid, but I mean, would it be possible to use the dedicated admin connection to do restores of system databases?
No, that's not possible.
Okay.
There's only one connection possible.
So you have to fight this
Yes.
first connection issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yes? Mhm. No, I've already installed on this machine, for example, I'm already on CU6, this one. So when I did a rebuild, I just took the original DVD, so without the CU in it. So that's not an issue. So that's not a problem. All right? So this is the master database. It automatically brings my databases back online. I just need to do a restore of my MSDB. In MSDB, you have the information about the jobs and so on. To do the restore there, you just need to disable the SQL Server agent, which is already disabled in my case. And then you can just restore it like a user database. So just run restore database MSDB from disk with replace. Let's do that. So when I do a refresh of my jobs, I get the well-known Ola Hallengren jobs back in my system, right? Then the last system database is my model database, and again, it's really easy to restore that one. You just have to restore it like an ordinary user database. Restore database model, and that's it. I'm back up and running. Why not restoring the TemDB? You can't perform a backup. So if you, on restart of SQL Server, it's just going to create a new, fresh TemDB. So there's no need for me to restore this. All right? So I don't know, it just took me like 7 minutes to get my system back up and running. So it's pretty fast. All right, that brings me to the end of the session. So we have seen different new options for the backups. We have seen new options for our restore. And last, we have seen the system databases. Now, there's one thing that I would like to, it's like Steve Jobs. There's one thing that I would like to mention, but that's maybe something for after the questions. Are there any other questions? No? Yes?
File backup and file group backups. In order to be able to take those backups, should we consider the consistency between tables, foreign keys, or a table definition?
Sorry, can you repeat again, please? I didn't understand it.
Thinking of restoring the file backup and file group backups,
yes.
Should we consider the table definition file, where is the table definition resides, or the consistency between tables like foreign keys, like for example, if one of my tables is on file group A, the other is on file group B, and if they have the foreign key relation, what will happen while restoring? Should we consider those to be able to?
You should. Yeah, you should keep that in mind. That
headache, I think.
Sorry?
It is a little bit headache. I mean,
you're right. If you have a foreign key that is pointing to another table on another file group, these transactions will actually fail because the other table is not available at that moment. So that's a good remark. You have to keep that. Is
it that is why nobody takes a file backup or file group backup? Is it the reason?
Sorry?
Nobody takes the file backup or file group backups. You ask the question, nobody.
Apparently, no. Nobody is doing that.
Maybe.
Yeah?
Thank you.
All right. I promised you one last thing, and that's the SQL Server Backup to Windows Azure tool. Anybody knew that this exists? This is few people. All right, cool. Now, the cool thing about this tool is that you can use it to put your backup files onto the Azure storage, but for older versions of SQL Server, starting from SQL Server 2005 onwards. Now, you don't have to use the Azure storage in the tool. You can also redirect or just use it for local backups. But there is an extra functionality in there. You can also use compression and you can use encryption. So I've used that tool already to do migrations from SQL Server 2005 to newer versions for large databases, but I've used the tool just to compress my data files so that I reduced my migration time. So it's free to download. Just type this in, SQL Server Backup to Windows Azure tool, and you can download it. Install it is a service that is running in the background, which is going to redirect your backup files. All right? One thing, always make sure you have good backups, but please also test your backup files by doing a restore on a regular basis. If you have a corrupt backup file, but you don't know it, and then you suddenly need to do a restore of your database, yeah, you can have some trouble. So a good DBA not only takes good backups, but only performs regular restores. All right? Thanks for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it, and maybe I see you next year. Thanks. Bye-bye.